Okay, it's freezing temperatures outside and a little bit of snow cover, and we all start ramping up feeding the birds a little bit more. But most of us aren't really paying attention to the fact that they're thirsty too. The ponds are freezing up. I'd like to talk to you today about how to use a bird bath over the winter time and have it not break on you, and how to keep the water from freezing up. Let's take a look at this video. Okay, so a lot of us are starting to feed the birds and paying attention to make sure they have lots of food to eat, but they're not paying attention that the birds are thirsty. Freezing outside, temperatures are frozen up, that means ponds are freezing up, puddles are freezing up, and the birds are getting thirsty. So conventional bird baths have solved that need, and a lot of people think of it as just a place for the birds to go to bathe and clean off. But let's face it, they drink out of it too, and especially in the wintertime. However, most of us start dealing with some of these ceramic or classic terracotta or clay bird baths. They give you the best selection, most decorative, but at the same time are very vulnerable to, one, in these snowstorms or anything like that, the tops breaking off and falling over, and they smash pretty easy. So when you're selecting a traditional bird bath, there's lots of different styles out there, but most of them, the tops are interchangeable with the bottoms because they fall and break all the time, and so you want to get replacements. I always recommend getting one that has some kind of locking mechanism on it. This one is more flexible. Some of them are just a solid piece of the pottery itself, kind of like, I guess we don't even have any left. They're all going to the flexible tabs. But it makes it a little bit easier. You have to tug it. So you just line them up, push them down, and turn them. So it's still going to have a little wobble to it, but it's not going to pop off on you. So that stops the number one cause of bird baths breaking in the winter, is just from the storm blowing off. But second of all, the real, when we start really freezing solid, a lot of them will even break just because the water starts to freeze up on the top of the bird bath itself, and the ice itself can sometimes crack it. So there are lots of different models coming out that are more of these ceramic, not ceramic, but the some version of a resin composite bird baths. I haven't seen any that have the classic looks, but they're not bad, but they work, but they're never going to break from ice. So breaking from ice damage and just breaking in general is the first priority. Defend them a little bit, maybe not put them in a complete wind tunnel, or make sure they're on level ground. But then from there, this bird bath is not going to do any bit of good to your birds if it freezes up and it's rock solid. So that's where all these little bird baths, they sell little heaters that can go inside your bird bath itself, and they're designed to keep an opening in the ice and to keep your bird bath in the water state all winter long, so the birds can actually bathe and drink out of it. So, but there are definitely some pros and cons with some of these. I'd say these heavy duty are kind of the old faithful. They've sold them, it came over from the stock tank industry for cattle. They're really designed to crank some heat into going through. These are a little bit more energy efficient, because that's what I start looking at. One, this is not very nice to look at. It is purely a functional component. Just like some of these others that are more of an economy heater, they work much lower cost up front, but we go from about 150 watt units down to about 45 watts. And so they work, but you compromise aesthetics for what it looks like for function. But basically, they sit inside the bird bath, and I would suspect with this, you'd have to put a rock or something on top of it. I haven't. We've sold it for 20 years, or as long as I can remember anyway, and they function. I very rarely get returns, but I've never used one myself, so I can't say how well. These Old Faithfuls, they work. But one of the things I don't like about these, despite the higher energy consumption, is the short cords. The way these work is you've got to throw it inside, and then your cord has to drape over. Now I have to run an extension cord over to it, and my extension cord is right next to my water source. So it seems to me, I just don't like that. Water and electricity, not my favorite combination. And so this is probably my favorite out of the ones that have come across. You can see in the picture that one, it's gonna crank a little bit of heat out there. It's in between. It's only 75 watts, so a little bit more than the economy version, but less than the other one. But it's a little more decorative. But the cord is definitely a little bit longer. gets me a little bit farther away from the edge. But one of the things I've noticed with the birds, and I was noticing on my pond the other day, that the birds were coming up, and even though my pond was wide open of ice, I actually had no ice on the pond because we've been so mild, but the bird was having a hard time getting down to the water where it could actually drink and actually bathe, because I didn't have any shallow portions. So on these bird baths, you can see something like this that has a little bit more meat to it in the center. The birds will actually go and sit on this, because if you're talking a small chickadee or a sparrow, and depending on how deep your bird bath is, if you've got 3 inches of water, the bird is still going to have a hard time. They don't want to get soaking wet. They're not going to just fly up and truly submerge themselves in a bath. They're going to try to perch up on the edge. So one of these that have a little bit more girth to them in the center and still economic in electricity consumption gives a little platform for the birds to sit. And I would probably not try filling the bird bath all the way. I would keep it a little bit shallower and make it so that the birds, again, don't have to completely go in neck deep before they go. But that's it. Keep an eye on it. Please, anytime you're washing these things off, follow all the safety instructions. Number one is anytime you've got to add water to it or work with it with these short cords, unplug your extension cords. Make sure you're plugging your extension cords into a GFI protected outlet. But that's it. There's no moving parts. Just keep the birds happy over the winter. Give them plenty of water and food, and you're really going to give them all they need in the wintertime to be happy. Hope that helps. Thanks.